All right, man, peace. So, NBA great LeBron James recently tied NBA legend Larry Bird in triple doubles at 59 with his victory over Lonzo Ball and the LA Lakers last Thursday night. This led to a very fervent debate between Skip Bayless and Shannon Sharpe. Of course, they're going to talk about it, and I'm going to chime in.
LeBron was typical LeBron in last night's win against the Lakers. He had a triple-double, finishing with 25 points, 12 rebounds, and 12 assists. It was the 59th triple-double of his career, tying him with the great Larry Bird for 6th place on the all-time list. For the kids out there, Larry Bird was a 3-time MVP and 3-time NBA champion.
And let me also add on to what Joy Taylor just stated about Larry Bird. Yes, Larry Bird was a 3-time MVP, and he also won his 3 MVPs consecutively. From the 83-84 season to the 85-86 season, he won 3 consecutive MVPs. And I also believe, if I remember correctly, that he finished second in MVP voting in 87 to Magic Johnson and in 88 to Michael Jordan. Larry Bird also was the first man to usher in or to enter the 50-40-90 club. He did that twice in 1987 and 1988. As I've stated numerous times on this channel, ad infinitum, in my honest opinion, Larry Bird was greater than LeBron James is. I believe that LeBron James is just now, in the last couple of seasons, entering into the class of Larry Bird in regards to his mental acuity. What separated LeBron from Larry Bird, in my view, was his mental approach. Yes, of course, we all know that LeBron James is far superior to Larry Bird physically. But mentally, the gap between Larry Bird and LeBron was as wide as the physical gap between LeBron James and Larry Bird. LeBron has just started to close the gap mentally in the last couple of seasons. Larry Bird could do things because of his mental acuity, his mental strength, that LeBron James simply could not do until the last couple of years. Now, when you watch LeBron play, you see the freedom of mind. He does not have the burden, the self-imposed burden on his conscience that he had prior to winning the championship in Cleveland. That was a huge, huge burden that was once again self-imposed that you could see has been alleviated after he defeated the Golden State Warriors in 2016. Larry Bird never had that. Larry Bird from the very beginning had an extremely aggressive approach to the game, which led him to get involved in a lot of physical altercations when he first came into the NBA. But Larry Bird, in my view, is probably the greatest clutch shooter of all time, even over the great Michael Jordan. If I needed somebody to make one jump shot in a clutch moment, I would probably take Larry Bird even over Michael Jordan. That's how great Bird was until he suffered a series of debilitating injuries starting in the mid-'80s. He hurt his back. I believe he was helping his mother around the house, something like that. He was digging some type of ditch and he hurt his back in like 85. And then he had a lower leg injury in 88 where he missed the whole season. When he came back, he was never the same after that.
While LeBron is a 4-time MVP and 3-time champion. Shannon, who would you rather have on your team, LeBron or Larry?
Skip, I don't know how many people know this, but growing up, Larry Bird was my favorite NBA player.
Really? I did not know that.
I had every...
You had to have known that because I knew it because Shannon Sharpe has mentioned it on this show numerous times. He mentioned it the last time that you spoke about Larry Bird, that Larry Bird was his favorite player growing up.
Every T-shirt that Larry Bird had, I bought those heavy green shoes. Larry Bird was my guy. Larry Bird was LeBron James before LeBron James is LeBron James.
I don't know if I would go that far. Maybe he means in regards to Larry Bird being a small forward who could take over the game and dominate the game. Maybe he means it from that perspective. But LeBron James was not Larry Bird until the last couple of seasons mentally. Larry Bird was a far more dominant player mentally than LeBron James has ever been. LeBron is just now starting to enter into that phase of mental dominance, mostly because most of the old guard of great NBA players is no longer around. Guys like Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce and Kobe Bryant, people who could contest him mentally and defeat him mentally, are no longer around. Now, LeBron James has superseded all those players, not only because of his skill level and his physical abilities, but now he's finally coming into the fullness of his manhood as a basketball player. So he has transcended all of those players. Now he's in the upper echelon of all-time greats. When you talk about a LeBron James, you also have to mention guys like Bill Russell, Kareem, Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, and Michael Jordan. LeBron is in that room. I'm not sure if he's at that table, at the main table, but he's in the room. The main table to me is Jordan, Kareem, and Bill Russell. Larry Bird and Magic, they have chairs there, but those chairs, they can't sit there full time. LeBron to me is just outside of that table.
But saying all that, I'm going to take LeBron. There's nothing. Both guys could score the basketball, could rebound the basketball, could assist. I don't know if people know this, but Larry Bird is a 24-point scorer, a 10 rebound, 6 assists for a career.
And that's counting the debilitating injuries that he had, particularly starting from the 88-89 season where he had some lower leg. I'm trying to remember what it was. If he broke his ankle or his foot or bone spur, something like that he had. Or he missed basically the whole 88-89 season. He came back. He was still a great player, but he wasn't quite the same after that.
24, 10, and 6 as a small forward. LeBron James is 27, 7, and 7. So they're very similar to what they do.
Let's also please understand that LeBron James is playing in an era where there's a far higher knowledge of physical fitness, conditioning, so on and so forth.
But LeBron James, more athletic, could get to the rim a lot easier than Larry. 15 trillion times better defender.
No, he's not a 15 trillion times better defender than Larry Bird. Larry Bird was a 3-time all-defensive team member in the early 80s. I believe he was on the second team. But he made some all-defensive team. Larry Bird was not a terrible defender. He just wasn't fast. A lot of times people try to associate Larry Bird's lack of tangible foot speed with him being a bad athlete. He was not a bad athlete. There are many forms of great athleticism. He had phenomenal hand-eye coordination, and he also was very quick. He had quick hands, extremely quick hands, and he had phenomenal anticipation, which made up for his lack of foot speed. That's the reason why he was able to bait Isaiah Thomas into that inbounds pass that he stole and gave it off to Dennis Johnson, and Dennis Johnson got the bucket. Also, please keep in mind, Larry Bird averaged 6 assists a game with a great point guard like Dennis Johnson on his team. He was not a ball dominator like LeBron. LeBron is a ball dominator. That's why I say you can't always look at numbers. You can't always look at stats to determine who the greater player was. They both make their teammates much better. They both make their teams much better.
Larry never took the responsibility of guarding the team's other best player. LeBron James can.
That's not true. Larry Bird will guard the other team's best player if that player happened to play his position. Now, is he a transcendent athlete like a LeBron James, where you could put LeBron on a Derrick Rose or a Kobe Bryant, things like that? No, of course not. But Larry Bird would guard Bernard King. He would guard Dominique Wilkins. He would guard Alex English. He would guard Xavier McDaniel. The NBA in the 80s was rife with great small forwards. Much greater small forwards than you have today. Now, in today's game, you have LeBron, you have KD. You have a few other guys. A lot of these guys are what I call 2.5s, meaning they gravitate between shooting guard, small forward. Like guys like Kawhi and Jimmy Butler and Paul George. Good to great players. But in Larry Bird's era, you had some all-time great small forwards. George Gervin was kind of a 2.5. He gravitated between shooting guard and small forward as well. But Larry would guard his man. He was not the terrible defender that Shannon's trying to make him out to be to make his argument.
James can guard 1 through 5. Now, he doesn't do it as frequently as he once did, but when the game's on the line, Skip, he just jumped on Kemba Walker. They play in Charlotte. He got on Schroeder.
Mm-hmm. He did.
Schroeder.
Yeah.
Even though in Charlie Brown they call him Schroeder. But anyway.
It's a different guy.
Yeah, but he will guard the best player when it comes time. But Skip, how do you argue? 4 MVPs to 3. That's what you do. I'm just taking the numbers now. 4 MVPs to 3. Both are 3 champions. But nobody else has even come close to winning the Finals MVP on the winning team that LeBron was on. So, looking at the numbers, looking at the longevity, I don't know how you could say anything other than the greatest small forward in the 70-plus history of the NBA. Dr. James Naismith to be very, very proud of this young man. Is one, LeBron James, born to glorious James, December 30th, 19. Well, you know what?
Wait a minute, he's about to be 33?
And kicking butt and putting butts in people like he's 23, Joey.
Butts in him.
But, whoa. Get.
I love him. Look, Shannon makes a compelling argument, but no, this is definitely a debate. It definitely is a conversation. I think that if you look at Larry Bird at his peak compared to LeBron James at his peak, you can pretty much put both their names in a hat and pull out whichever one you want and take that person. The same way that LeBron has his advantages over Larry Bird physically, Larry has his mentally. He also is a far greater long-range shooter, a far greater mid-range shooter, a far greater free throw shooter. Anticipation, I would give a slight edge to Larry Bird. Of course, athleticism, you give a great edge to LeBron James. Clutch performer, I will give an edge to Larry Bird, and not a great edge. LeBron is much better in the clutch than people give him credit for, but Larry Bird is better in the clutch.
Well, at least you were somewhat conflicted here because I did not know Larry Bird was your guy.
Larry, my guy.
And you did have those old heavy green shoes.
I
know
did.
what those were.
But you know,
I don't know how anybody played it. I don't know how he played in them.
I had upped them.
Yeah.
They call you boy the escalator, Skip, because I went up real slow, but I'm going to get to the top. Bam! Ducking with joy.
Larry Bird did not have ups.
Well, you know what? Let me stop Skip right there for a moment. No, Larry didn't have crazy ups. He wasn't a high flyer, but his vertical was 28 inches. It wasn't like it was 15 inches. No. Larry has his share of dunk overs. There's some guys that Larry Bird dunked on. He dunked on Dennis Rodman. Great reverse baseline dunk that he had on Dennis Rodman when they played in the Eastern Conference Finals in '87. Larry Bird had like a 28-inch vertical, which is the same vertical as Karl Malone. But nobody says that Karl Malone was a bad athlete. But because Karl Malone had that great physique, people associate athleticism with Karl Malone, as well as the fact that he was so aggressive on the court. Larry Bird was aggressive also, but he also had a great finesse game. So, all in all, Larry Bird was a much better athlete than people give him credit for. And as I already stated, there's a lot that goes into athleticism rather than just tangible metrics like leaping ability and things of that nature.
If you're talking ups, you got me. If you're talking game in and game out stats, December, January, February, you got me.
I agree. LeBron is one of the great stat compilers of all time. By the time he's finished, he's probably going to have every cumulative record in NBA history.
Just all around talent, just game in. If you're talking longevity, you really got me because Larry Bird barely made it through 13 years and he actually missed a whole year in there. So he really just played 12 years. So remember.
And Larry Bird also, once again, he did not have the information that modern day players have, the access to performance enhancing drugs and personal trainers. And back then in the 80s, the 80s was really the vanguard of players even weightlifting. Like in most professional sports other than football, most of the athletes did not even really lift weights. Now, you had certain players who, when they would get into the twilight of their career, they would turn to weightlifting to try to rejuvenate their body, like Dr. J did. He turned to weightlifting near the end. But most of the players, they just did calisthenics, maybe get in the pool. They certainly were not gym rats in regards to lifting weights and things of that nature. Not like they are today. LeBron James has a freakish physique. A lot of it genetic and natural, some of it not. People get upset when I say that, but it is what it is. Larry Bird definitely knew nothing about that. He had the body of a beer drinker. If Bird was more cognizant and aware of physical conditioning, he probably would not have hurt his back like he did back in '85.
Remember, all those triple-doubles you're talking about came in really just 12 years,
yes.
And LeBron is now in his 15th year. So you got to give Larry not longevity, but in that time allotted, and his back started to flare up because, let's face it, nobody in those days took care of themselves the way LeBron James does.
Thank you, Skip. Thank you. This is the first time that I'm watching this segment in full. So thank you, Skip, for saying that. The players back then did not have the understanding and the knowledge of physical conditioning that players have today, which really is adding 5 to 6 more years onto their careers. Let me also say this. Larry Bird was a better passer than LeBron James, and LeBron is a phenomenal passer. But I would give Larry Bird the slight edge in passing over LeBron James.
Does now, and especially Larry Bird did not take care of himself the way LeBron does now. So if you want to do all that, you got me. All I know is one game from my life, I want Larry Joe Bird taking my last shot. That guy from French Lick, Indiana, because he was almost the baddest man. He was right there just a tick behind Michael Jeffrey Jordan when it came to clutch shooting. Game on the line.
Look, I might take Larry Bird as a hair even over Michael, because Larry Bird could even hit the clutch 3. Michael would more go for 2. Now, of course, in a moment where you needed a 3, Michael could pull up for 3. And he had some 3-point shots that he hit that were big. But Larry Bird had 35-foot range, even in that era.
Free throw, 3, jump shot, whatever it was, I'll take Larry Bird any day or any night over especially LeBron James.
They didn't want game. You got to play multiple games.
And Larry had a great handle, too. Quiet as kept. He had a great handle. Great behind-the-back dribble. Could go between the legs. Real sharp handle. And could pass equally well with the left or the right hand.
That's what I'm saying. This is it. Money on the line, any sort of outside shooting, or just creating a shot. I'll take Larry Bird over LeBron James, who, as we know, has run from the free throw line his whole... We don't need that.
Can I ask you a question, Skip?
I haven't finished. It's my turn, Joy.
I just want to ask you one thing.
I agree with Skip. Let Skip finish, Shannon. You had your say already. We already know how you feel about your man.
No, I don't.
Okay, well, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to keep going because, again, LeBron liability from the free throw line. He's starting to plummet again, back towards 67%. He's
76%.
And he runs from the free throw line. He even changed his routine again last night because he's getting desperate. Larry Bird was the best free throw shooter in pro basketball 4 times. Almost 90% for his career.
88.
Yeah, but I'm saying he won it 4 times.
Yeah.
That's pretty great.
Yeah.
And what happened the first 3 3-point shootouts at All-Star Weekend? First 3 that they had, who dominated?
Larry.
That guy dominated. And who will ever forget, in Michael's house in Chicago, remember Larry Bird? Remember what he did as he launched the last 3?
He held the one.
He held his finger up because he knew it was good.
Yeah.
He knew it was good. Can we see? Oh! It was good. He knew it was good before he shot it.
Had that tape on that note.
That was a bad man.
Skip, Joy, I don't know if people know this. Do you realize that LeBron James' 3-point playoff average is higher than Larry Bird? He shoots a higher percentage from 3-point line than Larry Joe Bird.
Well, look, that's more indicative of the era than actual 3-point shooting proficiency, Shannon, because we both know that with the game on the line, you don't want LeBron James shooting a 3 over Larry Bird. Me and you both know that. So really all that does is prove how inflated many of the 3-point shooting numbers are today because the players practice the shot more. The 3-point shot is looked at as a primary offensive maneuver in today's game. Back in Larry Bird's era, for the most part, the 3-point shot was a shot that the coach only allowed 1 or 2 guys to even take that shot. On the Celtics team, the only players who probably were allowed to even take the shot were Larry Bird and Danny Ainge, and maybe Dennis Johnson or Jerry Seasting if they were open. But the 3-point shot was just not a primary shot in that era. So you cannot always just look at percentage points to determine who was a better shooter. The players coming up today are trained to take the 3-point shot as a primary offensive weapon.
If you want to start going second level about who made...
Even Joy shook her head because she knows that that's just a silly attempt at a point by Shannon. Like, come on. Do you really believe that LeBron James is a better 3-point shooter than Larry Bird? No. So why even bring that up?
who made the shots to win games. I'll do it all day and all night. We don't have long enough to do this here. But you even mentioned defense. You said he can't even hold the candle. I don't know what your line was about Larry Bird.
Okay.
Do you realize Larry Bird 4 times, not once or twice, but 4 times led the NBA in defensive win shares? Now,
Wow, that's impressive.
not once has LeBron led the NBA in defensive
How
win
many
shares.
all defensive teams did Larry Bird?
This is creating havoc.
He was on 3. He made the second team 3 times, Shannon. Skip should have had that stat. Whoever's in Skip's ear should be looking up that information right now to help him out. Larry Bird made 3 all-defensive teams. He was on the second team, but he still made 3.
This is creating problems on defense. He roamed. What did you say that LeBron does? He played. What did you say? He's
Earl Thomas
Earl
now.
Thomas.
He used to be Dion, locking folk down. But here's the thing to Skip.
Larry Bird was Dion all along.
No.
He couldn't go take the point guard,
No.
but he could disrupt.
He wasn't Skip. LeBron James can guard 1 through 5. You've seen it.
Mm-hmm.
And all I know is you say you love the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know LeBron James increases his average come playoff time in points and assists? I thought that's what you want to do. You want to see a guy showcase.
Yep.
Well, the thing is this: whenever you see certain statistics like that, where players increase their points, their rebounds, their assists, that's good. But you also have to have an understanding of what type of system are they running. Is their offensive system totally dependent on getting the ball to or running the plays through one player? Or do you have a ball movement style of offense like the Boston Celtics ran throughout the 80s? Please understand, Larry Bird could bring the ball up. He could have ran the point, but they had Dennis Johnson. Larry Bird could have been a guy who demanded 25 shots a game, but he didn't do that because why? They had Kevin McHale, they had Robert Parrish. So you really cannot compare Larry Bird's numbers to LeBron James's numbers, because any team that LeBron is on, they're running the LeBron system. I've touched on this already. Larry Bird, to me, is much more similar to the type of player that Kevin Durant is on the Golden State Warriors right now than what LeBron James is currently with the Cleveland Cavaliers.
He increases. Look, I'm not. This is and Skip. And anytime you start critiquing, you say this is this. People make it seem like there's nothing to poo-poo about Larry Bird. He was special. Like I said, he was LeBron before LeBron, just less athletic.
I don't really see much. I don't see much kinship in their style of play. I mean, I think I understand what Shannon is alluding to. That Bird was dominant at the small forward in his era, like LeBron is dominant at the small forward in this current era. But when I think about LeBron before LeBron, I think of guys like Grant Hill. I think of guys like a Scottie Pippen in that little intermediary period where Jordan was gone. That's where I see the precursor to LeBron James. I don't see the precursor to LeBron with Larry Bird, other than if you're talking about overall dominance.
But Skip, be for real.
I'm being real.
I heard Oscar Robertson say last night for him. Now this is the big O, who got the most triple doubles ever. Said it's Kareem, and he said it's one man born. If you weren't born to Gloria James in Akron, Ohio on December 30th, 1984, he ain't talking about you.
Well, that's not really what Oscar said. As we've already seen on the video that I did in regards to that legend roundtable, what Oscar actually said was that he would put LeBron anywhere from 5 to 2. He didn't say who his number 1 is. Shannon is assuming that he has Kareem at number 1, just as I did. But you never know. Oscar may have somebody else at number 1. He never explicitly stated who he has as his number 1. Shit, knowing Oscar, he may have himself at number 1.
Oscar Robertson said it's Kareem, and then it's LeBron. Isaiah Thomas said it's Kareem, then it's LeBron.
Well, we know why Isaiah Thomas said that. Nothing against that brother, but I mean, come on. I don't take anything that Isaiah Thomas had to say about the LeBron James Michael Jordan comparison seriously.
Now, I'm just saying.
Maybe Oscar should have said it's Kareem, then it's Russell Westbrook.
Thank you, sir. Touche.
Right?
Stop.
What did Russell do last year?
You do realize that for the first 5 years of his NBA career, Oscar Robertson averaged a triple-double. You do realize that, Skip?
He did.
As a point guard,
And you realize they had like 20 more possessions a game back then.
I'm like, I can't do nothing about how many possessions they had. I'm just saying, this is a Larry Bird. And Skip.
Very relevant point brought up by Skip, which Shannon could not refute. One thing I will say about Oscar Robertson, even though he did average a triple-double in an era where there were more possessions, Oscar Robertson was still extremely proficient. If you look up his lifetime shooting percentage, he shot over 48% for his career. So he wasn't some guy out there shot jacking like Russell Westbrook. He was making the right decisions on the court. But there were more rebounds to be had because there were more possessions. But if it was that easy, then everybody would have been doing it. Only he was doing it. Just like today, only Westbrook is really doing it. You know, guys like James Harden, they flirt with it. LeBron flirts with it, but only Westbrook is really doing it. So they deserve credit from that perspective.
Skip, like I say, look at Larry. I mean, you look at that, you're like, oh, Mike ain't about to do nothing. Wop, wop, wop. That's why everybody wanted to fight him. Because they looking at him and he talking crazy to him. Hey, come here, Doc. That's why Doc poked him in his eye.
You think that guy's backing down from him?
Oh, no.
Well, Doc poked him in his eye, you know. Doc hit him with the 1-2 because Larry Bird was really talking greasy to him. He was telling him it was time for you to retire. Like Larry Bird had scored like 40-some odd points on Dr. J, and Dr. J only had like 6 points, and Larry Bird kept telling him 42-6, Doc, 42-6, man. It's time for you to hang it up. And they had a little scrum where their arms kind of got wrapped up, and Dr. J kind of nudged him a little bit, and Larry Bird, of course, followed up trying to antagonize him even more. And Dr. J wasn't having it. Now, in the aftermath of that fight, Larry Bird really wasn't upset about the fight. He was upset because none of his teammates jumped in for him like Dr. J's teammates jumped in for him. But I think the reason why Larry Bird's teammates didn't jump in for him was because even they had such a high regard and respect for Julius Erving that to see him act like that, to see Dr. J lose his cool like that, I think even they thought that Larry Bird was in the wrong. But Larry Bird was a fierce and cutthroat competitor, and he was not trying to have any friends on the basketball court. It was nothing personal, but that's the takeaway that Larry Bird had from that altercation, that his teammates did not jump in to assist him like Dr. J's teammates jumped in. Because if you watch that scrum, Charles Barkley jumped in, Moses Malone jumped in, everybody was holding Larry. Larry was getting caught, wop, 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 and he couldn't even get his shit off because his teammates wasn't helping, and he was getting wrapped up. I think Charles Barkley had him wrapped up.
No.
You remember what he did in Dallas before the three-point shootout? He goes in the locker room, and the opponents are all getting dressed, and he said, which one of you is going to finish second?
Yeah.
Which one of you guys is going to finish second?
Holmes.
Except he didn't say guys.
That was his word back then, Holmes.
Holmes? I don't think he said Holmes.
Oh, no, not in the locker room, but on the court.
Oh, yeah.
Come here, Holmes, and get this three guy. Hey, I'm going to fake you right here. You ain't going to go for it, and I'm going to put this jump in your eye. But LeBron ain't about that talking. LeBron don't do no talking. You know why, Skip? I do the talking. I'm Bundini Brown.
You know what they said in that era? Larry Bird was the greatest trash talker of a really rough, tough era of the NBA.
Yeah.
He would tell you about it, and then he would do it.
It's because you didn't normally see a guy him. You know, that's what we do. We come up with the black talk. We talking.
Well, Larry Bird is on record as stating that the reason why he talks so much trash, and he developed his style of trash talk on the court from pickup games that he would have with the hotel staff, an all-black hotel staff at a hotel in Indiana. He would play pickup with his friends, or he would practice after school, and then he would go to the hotel and play on the blacktop with the all-black staff at a certain hotel in Indiana. And that's where he developed a lot of his style of play, as well as his affinity for trash talk and mental warfare on the court.
Even if we couldn't play, we gonna talk like we could play. Larry had game talking. He like, hold on, did white dude just say that to me? But that old that joker right there, that one on the left, that's in the 2 slot on Mount Rushmore, that head left. If you looking face on,
Well, he's in a 2 slot on Mount Rushmore if there's more than one Mount Rushmore, because the first Mount Rushmore, LeBron ain't on it. The first Mount Rushmore is Michael, Bill Russell, Kareem, and Magic. And that second Mount Rushmore, he's the second head on it, but the first one's Larry Bird.
Yeah. Guy who shot 1 for 6 from 3 last
that's all right. 25, 12, and 12.
Well, Tom Brady.
But anyway, this is a great conversation, great debate between Larry Bird and LeBron James. If LeBron James wants to transcend the Larry Bird comparisons, in my view, he has to win another championship. If he does, then he's right there with Larry. It's just interesting that people try to add points for LeBron James due to his participation in the finals. Well, if that's the case, then Jerry West should be in the top 10 all time, because Jerry West played in like 9 finals. He only won 1 though. Right, when you start talking about all-time greats, we have to talk about victories, not participation. So we know that Larry Bird, he won 3 championships. He played in an era in the early 80s where they had to battle with Philadelphia. And as I've already touched on, Dr. J was beating the Celtics early on. People don't really bring that up. People love to talk about how Jordan never got to the finals until the Pistons got old, supposedly. Even though when you look at all those players on the Pistons, they were all in their late 20s. Isaiah Thomas, I think, was the oldest at like 30 years old. But Bird went through the same thing with Philadelphia. Detroit went through the same thing with Boston. That's the cycle. But anyway, peace.